here, Reverend Catherine is a dear friend of mine, so I just want to say what an honor it is to be here. And I just feel the love and the joy and the unity and just the wonderfulness of you all here at CSL TV. And whenever I used to see CSL TV on Facebook or places, I thought it literally meant television, CSL television. And I finally got it, that it's connected about it. So we're talking about walking the talk today. And, you know, I think it's this is kind of a crucial time in our lives as spiritual beings, as light workers, right? Where perhaps things on the outside are not quite looking the way some of us would like them to look. And this is where we get to really practice our teachings, is it not? Because we know that we're born to be and that we are the love, the light, the truth, the beauty, the goodness, the sweetness, the wholeness of Spirit itself. And we strive to be that. And yet I think that in order to walk a balanced life, we also have to acknowledge that we walk with two parts of ourselves. We walk with that divine part of ourselves that is all those things I talked about and more. We are that. Yet we're spiritual beings having a human experience as well. And as by very fact or virtue of the fact that we're human, we're going to make mistakes sometimes. Am I the only one that makes mistakes? We are going to have unskilled behavior sometimes. We are going to be very human sometimes. And I think it's so important that we honor both of those. Obviously, we want to show up in the world as joy. We want our idea of ourselves to match what we project out there in the world. So I want to talk today about that. I know the theme is a balanced life. How do we walk the talk? How do we be the loving human beings that we're born to be when we're outraged and angered at what might be going on? How do we do that? How do we stay in that place of peace and trust and surrender when our loved ones are getting ill or our own body might be betraying or failing us? How do we stand rooted in the abundance and prosperity that we know we are when our house is in foreclosure and our bank account has dried up? How do we do that? So it all starts within us. It all starts within. It starts with recognizing that we, as human beings, we have fears, we have feelings, we have doubts, we have sadness, we have anger, we have disappointment. It's not spiritual to have those things. It's not spiritual to project those out onto the world and act them out. The deal is we have to be really present with ourselves. We have to welcome those feelings home within our own being. We have to have the courage to sit with them, to give them room to express. We have to go deeper and investigate as to what those feelings are really about. What are the false beliefs underneath those feelings? But when we create a safe place within our own being, this is why I love breath work, because it creates a safe place for whatever is standing in the way to gently come up, be present, be felt, be experienced, so it can be released, and so that we can then move about the world in joy and love and peace. Because what we don't own owns us. So if we have repressed rage or sadness, and we're not expressing it, we're not creating a safe place within our own being, or we're not seeing a practitioner, a therapist, a breath worker, we're not acknowledging it, then it is going to leak out in the world. Now would be a good time to take a nice full breath. Right? So it leaks out in the world. That anger is going to leak out at the person that cut us off on the highway. That anger is going to leak out at one of our children or our spouse or our friends. That sadness is going to leak out over a sloppy commercial or something like that, and it's okay. But the more we can be with ourselves, the more we can allow, the more in balance that we are. Make sense, everyone? You with me so far? So the other thing I think in order to stay in balance is, and we have to recognize that underneath it all, that all really any of us want, we have to understand is love. We're all just want to love and be loved. We all want to love and be loved. So how do I stay in a loving place no matter what? I take responsibility for my feelings, for my reactions, for the knowing that I showed up on this earth plane, well, after childhood, with all my buttons installed. And no one out there installed any of my buttons after the age of 7 or 8. But many people push my buttons. Taking responsibility means standing in that space of saying there is nothing out there. My reaction is my reaction. That person came along to give me an opportunity to heal something, so that I can sit with my reaction, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, disappointment, letdown, whatever it may be, so that I can maybe heal that. But if I stand in the victim box, which I've been known to do, I'm human, right? As the song says, us ministers or preachers, right, we talk the talk. How do we walk the talk? What was I talking about? I lost my train of thought. I can stand in the victim. You know, just like all of us, I've had experiences that have brought me to my knees. I've had heartache. I've had betrayal. I've had letdown and disappointment. And I can stand in the victim box and say, poor me. I just wanted to show up and be loving, and how could they treat me like that? It's not fair. Or I can stand on the blame box or in the blame chair, and the blame will say, how could they do that to me? They're bad, they're unskilled, they're angry, right? But we know the blame voice, right? And I can dance around between those two, and I could be there forever and ever, amen, and so it is, right? Now, those voices within me may need room and love within my own being to express. There's room for some sadness of the victim, there's room but we don't pitch a tent there and set up camp there with all our utensils, so that we're comfortable in that place. That doesn't create a balanced life. The place of empowerment, the place of balance, is standing in, taking responsibility. I am responsible for my peace. I am the creator of my life. What within me called this very situation forth, what false belief within me called it forth? What am I being asked to take a look at? What is it that I'm seeing out there in someone else that is really something within me that I can't accept? Take a breath on that. Because that which I cannot accept in someone else is just showing me what I can't accept in myself. That which someone else can't give to me is showing me where I'm lacking in giving to myself. So in order to be this balanced being, in order to walk in love and peace and beauty and truth, I have to constantly take responsibility for my life. I have to let go of projection. The projection that says that it's something out there that is doing it to me. Does that make sense? That's the place of living a balanced life. That's the place that brings us to a place of peace and empowerment and understanding. And when I recognize that everyone in my life, and sometimes particularly the people I have the most challenge with, are there by divine appointment for my soul's growth and my soul's learning, I can certainly treat them with a lot more love and acceptance than I can when I think somehow they've just showed up to hurt me and rain on my parade. Right? Everything is divinely ordained. And you know, I've been using this book, Paul Ferrini, The 12 Steps of Forgiveness, for talks lately. And so some of my material is coming from him. But he says, you know, which we all know, not just him, he says that, but relationships are mirrors. And particularly those people we're the closest to, our significant other relationships, or anyone where we're really close, they're holding up a mirror. And relationships, he says, can either be this wonderful place of spiritual unfoldment and evolvement and opening, or they can be self-crucifixion. And I know I've been in both, right? Where I feel like, that's what happens. Two people come together by divine appointment because their souls have called each other forth to dance the dance of sacred relationship. And if your partner isn't pushing your buttons, then you might want to delve a little deeper and open a little more, because it's perfect. And people come to me and say, oh, it's been so wonderful, and we've been together a year, 2 years, or whatever, and now we're just fighting all of the time. And I'm like, that's perfect. The honeymoon period is over, right? And then suddenly, we look at our partner and, they have similar traits of perhaps a parent that wounded us from the past. They have similar traits to the very things we don't want to see in ourselves. That's the divine orchestration. You know, the Course in Miracles says, what could you not accept if you but knew that every event, past, present, and yet to come, was gently placed by one whose only purpose was your highest and greatest good? Who or what could we not accept if we knew that? So as we are loving and kind and tender and gentle with the darkness and the sorrow and the sadness within us, as we are that with our joy and our happiness and our freedom, as we are loving with all parts of ourselves, it has to start within our own being. We can't give out what we haven't given to ourselves. Then we can show up as the loving, caring, giving beings onto others. Because we can see beneath the unskilled behavior, beneath the ego, beneath the personality that rubs us the wrong way, beneath the decisions that are being made, whatever it might be, and we can see underneath, there's a wounded little part in that person. And I can have compassion for that, and I can bring love there. That makes sense? Bring love there. Then we're congruent. Then we're congruent, because I do believe the time has come for us to walk our talk. Those of us that have been studying these teachings for years and years, and even if you're in the room, it means you're already in the discourse, you already know. And Marianne Williamson loves to say, there's no new information. There's no new information. We know it. We know it. Now the call of us, light chasers, light beings, now the call is for us to step into action with it. To step into action. And we are being given a great opportunity in the political arena right now to practice everything that we know. This is where we get to one of the ways where we get to walk our talk. Or is it just me? Because we can say we're spiritual beings, and then someone, I'm not mentioning any names, but someone can come on the TV, and where's that loving human being all of a sudden? Where is she gone? She's forgotten. There's a divine purpose for everything. And we know this. This is what our teachings, I thought there was an Ernest Holmes quote of it. This is what our teachings teach us. That there's a divine plan always unfolding. That Spirit is always having its way. And that Spirit is always evolving and growing. And either we stand in faith and trust of that, or we don't. Take a breath, everyone. So if we don't believe that everything is here for our greatest good, even though, again, it's that balance, the human part of us struggles. The human part of us is brought to our knees sometimes. The human part of us aches. The human part of us wants something to change. The human part says, why don't they get it? The human part says we're moving so far away from how we're supposed to be living and being. And yet, I put my faith in Spirit. I put my trust there. That no matter how it seems or looks or appears, all is part of the divine plan and the divine orchestration. And what is mine to do? Mine to do is to walk the talk. Mine to do is to stand in love even though I may be outraged. And I don't have to agree. But I can stand in love. Mine to do is to release judgment and guilt. Because you know what? No thought ever leaves home. Think about that. No thought ever leaves home. So we can put a lot of energy into hating or judging or resenting someone, some group, some organization, something out there. But that hate doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't leave us. It stays in us. And if we want to be in balance with who we're born to be, that hate and judgment and resentment and belittling and make wrong of anyone, any group, any organization, any political party or figure is not in alignment with that. So how wonderful that we get to practice. How wonderful. And we release judgment again on others. It's the balance by releasing judgment on ourselves. I sometimes think that we're so hard on ourselves. And we try very hard, most of us, to be these spiritual beings and live in alignment with the principles. And we can tend to, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but we can tend to really beat ourselves up and make ourselves wrong if we fall short. Anyone do that? So we cannot shift and grow from a place of self-judgment and making ourselves wrong. That energy is oppressive and suppressive. So I have a little story. I'm going to get vulnerable here. So when I first met my husband 25 years ago, I had not fully healed all my father issues. I hadn't. So I attracted a wonderful, beautiful, gentle, loving soul, and he had traits that really reminded me of my dad. And I would get, at certain times, enraged at him. It was like a little Tasmanian devil came out. And after one of those episodes, I would beat myself up mercilessly, you know, because I don't know if I was in prac training then, but I was certainly on the path. I certainly knew intellectually better. And I would be like, God, how can you be like that? That's so hateful, and you know all these teachings, and you know, you're teaching breath work, or you're doing this and you're doing that, and I'm never going to do it again, but I hated myself. I had such judgment. And then it didn't change. It kept happening until one day after a particular Tasmanian devil episode, I said to myself, and this all kind of happened naturally and organically, but I just stopped and I took a breath and I said to myself, you know, what is really going on? What is the hurt and the pain? Because this is not the truth of who you really are. This is me talking to myself. This is not the truth of who you really are. Who you really are is that love, is that peace, is that wisdom, is that harmony. So what's this all about? And through that voice of tenderness and self-love and allowing, I was able to get to a deeper level of what the wound was really all about, and my hurt and pain. Does that make sense? And be with that. And that began, I won't say she's pretty much gone now, but you know, it took that was the beginning of the end of the Tasmanian devil episodes. She wasn't going away while I was judging and criticizing her. She was ready to leave when the light of love and acceptance was shone upon her. That's what I'm inviting us all to do. We're human beings. We're doing the best that we can, right? There's a distinction between, you know, letting go of judgment and taking responsibility and guilting ourselves. You know, Paul Ferrini says guilt is, which is what I was doing, right? When we make ourselves wrong. Guilt comes from ego. Guilt says there's nothing I can possibly do that would make amends for all the wrongs or the terrible, horrible behavior I have. Taking responsibility brings spirit in all its magnificence and grace into the picture. And it says, I open this wound is here, therefore I can heal it. I actually want to read what Paul Ferrini says about that. Remember, responsibility does not come from the ego. Guilt does. Guilt continues the sense of separation. It keeps the wound open. I've told you what that says. Many New Agers, none of us here in the room, many of us New Agers have been taken up by our ego as tools not for growth, but for punishing ourselves and others. Many people who got really sick had to listen to drivel like, you made yourself sick. It's your anger that gave you cancer. You aren't healing because you're still holding on to your anger. Talk about a guilt trip. That's just the ego trying to run the irresponsibility tape. It doesn't work. When Spirit is in charge of the responsibility program, it makes everything all right. It makes this place of cancer or whatever it is a place to be and grow from. It doesn't measure progress with external standards. It just says there is a place within where peace can be found. How much gentler does that feel? There's just a place within where peace can be found. When we are talking about healing, we are talking about the release of self-judgment and guilt over the mistakes of the past. It involves responsibility and gentleness. It is a letting go of what doesn't belong to us. It is a washing clean of the sticky substance that appeared on our skin when we proceeded to justify our judgment of others. It is a bathing of the whole soul in love and acceptance. Bathing of the whole soul in love and acceptance. And I think in order to live a balanced life, right, we have to live in acceptance. Acceptance of ourselves and acceptance of others. And acceptance of life exactly as it is. And I was thinking about Byron Katie. She wrote that book, Loving What Is. And I don't know that I always love what is, but I can accept what is. I don't love that my younger brother died and left a 7-year-old daughter behind. I don't love that, but I can accept it. Because if I don't accept it, I'm out of alignment with the divine flow and harmony of the universe. If I don't accept it, I'm not in balance with the knowing that there's a divine plan that is always unfolding no matter how it seems or looks or appears. Make sense? I'm not in acceptance. So lastly, I know I'm running out of time. I tend to go on, sorry. So the last thing I want to talk about, balance, is the balance between the head and the heart. That's what we're being called to. Some of our teachings are very heady, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the first step on the spiritual path is gaining the information and the knowledge. And I believe in order for us to live a life of joy and freedom and peace, we have to embody the teachings. So at some point we throw out what we know and we are it and we live it, right? We live from that heart space. There's a wonderful little teaching about this. That's a great yogi who people came from miles and miles around to sit with and gain his knowledge, and this one devotee had been waiting to see this yogi who was his teacher and guru for many, many years. And he finally got to India and, traveled on rickety trains and walked for miles and miles and was led to the cave or the room of the yogi. And he came bursting in, and he just had one question after the other. He was, pumped up and excited, and he wanted to know, and he had questions, and he wanted the answers to it. And the yogi said, "Let's have some tea." And he sat him down and got 2 teacups out and had a teapot filled with tea. And he started filling the cup with tea, and he just kept filling it and filling it and filling it. And the tea overflowed and spilled on the devotee's clothes. And he's like, "What are you doing? You're spilling the tea." He said, "Your mind is like the tea. There's no room. It's overflowing with wanting to know, with knowledge. Let it go. Empty the mind. There's no room for anything else to come in." So at a certain point, right, we know what we know, and we step out with a beautiful balance between the head and the heart. We step out loving ourselves unconditionally. We step out loving each other unconditionally. We step out in faith and trust. I always say, this is one of my earlier teachers taught me, life works and you can trust it. And I've added a few things. I may not always like it. Sometimes it may hurt like hell. Sometimes it may bring me to my knees. Sometimes I may not understand it. But what I can trust is that it's always unfolding for my greatest and highest good. Life is always unfolding for our greatest and highest good. That's the balance. When we can live, move, and have our being from that place, all is well on some level. And then we take our little human part that's suffering and hurting, and we allow it, and we tend to it, and we are with it until that part too rises up. So I invite you to come if you would love to have your little tender part. Is this where I do a little announcement, or will I get to do a little announcement later about breath work, or should I? I'm going to do it now. So Tim, would you stand up? Tim is one of the facilitators with me. Tim and I will be facilitating healing breath work. There was a beautiful description of it. It's a great, powerful way. You know, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and words fall short. You have to experience it. I can't really put it into words, but it's a lot of what I talked about. Just come, breathe the breath, open up, allow yourself to be loved. And one thing I will guarantee is that you will have a blissful experience of spirit at the end of it all, no matter what goes on the mat, right? Okay, so let us have a healing moment, right? Let us pray. And let us breathe in. Infinite love, divine presence, sweet grace. The great I am that I am. The divine itself. That which makes its presence known over and over and over again. In the moon that glows, in the stars that twinkle, in the waves that crash the shore. Palpable here in this very room, in the unity, in the love that we are gathered in. This is the greatest truth. This is the ultimate reality, the great unseen behind all that's seen, the invisible behind all that's visible. How blessed am I to be one with it, how clear it is that it shines its light so beautifully and radiantly as each one here in this very room and all the sentient beings everywhere. There is that part of us that has never been touched, never been altered, never been perturbed, disturbed, or affected by any trauma, by any unskilled parenting, by any abuse even, by any false belief, by any doubt, any fear, any illusion. It's the light of the divine I am within us, eternally shining its flame as us, knowing itself as the freedom, as the love, as the joy, as the peace, as the unity that we're born to be. We are radiant lights from the infinite light. We're manifestations of love itself from the one heart. How blessed are we that this divineness lives and moves and has its being through and as us. So we are safe, we are loved, we are supported no matter what we are experiencing, no matter what is going on in our life, no matter what is going on in our body temple, no matter what, we're safe, loved, and supported because the divine within, around, through, and as us lifts us up and carries us forward. So I know for us this day, first and foremost, that we say yes. Yes to God, yes to life, yes to love, yes to being unspeakably kind with ourselves. Yes to shining the light of radical self-acceptance and love upon ourselves. Because in this way we live a balanced, harmonious life. Yes, to seeing the love that we are, and yes, to seeing the love beneath anything else that's going on with anyone else. We see the love. We recognize it. We recognize our oneness. And I speak a word of freedom for all of us. Freedom from anything that would limit, constrict, or bind us from being the bright shining stars the loving beings, the free beings that we're born to be. And I give thanks. I give thanks for the balance, for the harmony, for the love that we are born to be. I give thanks for the lights of these higher vibrational frequencies continually lifting us up and carrying us forward. I'm grateful to know that with ease and grace we release guilt, we release self-judgment, we live in loving acceptance of what is. We trust that love is the greatest power. We trust that love is the ultimate healer at the end of the day. We trust that love heals, love soothes, love rebirths us all over and over and over again. So with a grateful heart, I rest in the power of these words I speak. And I'm knowing that as I release them to the very soul of the universe, a divine pattern that is in alignment with all that I have spoken is already created in the mind of God on the unseen realm. It's done. There's a pattern for peace on this planet. There's a pattern for peace and love in our hearts. There's a pattern for unity and connection, not just with like-minded people, but with unlike-minded people too. It already exists. So we align ourselves with this highest consciousness. We walk the talk. We walk in balance. We are it. We are the ones. The love is here now, and I let it be, and so it is.